Before I get started with this video, I just want to greet everyone a very happy new year. And now that it's 2026, we have films that we are excited about. Notable names like Toy Story 5, The Odyssey, Spider-Man Brand New Day, and the long-awaited Avengers Doomsday, which for some reason got delayed. The original release date was way back on June, but they decided to reschedule it in December, so it's kind of sad, but at least we know that the Avengers are coming back. So in this video, we're gonna be going back in the year 2025, where I will be making my final overview of the movies from that year, and I will be presenting you what are my best and what are my worst movies of the year 2025. And also some additional info about it, just so you could relate, or maybe this will be relatable to the list itself. So prepare yourselves. So the year 2025 is quite an eventful year, since there is a lot of films that are very high on trend. But it is arguably an underwhelming year for movies, since all of the movies are based on looks but not on value. So here are my reasons why I would say that it's very underwhelming. So the first reason would be movie flops. Majority of the movies have flopped the box office, where some movies didn't surpass their budget or did get double of their budget. Companies like Disney that had the three that flopped.
Number 2, movies that didn't live up the hype. Some movies were too broad in their quality, with mixed opinions surrounding the movies.
Where live action remakes left viewers adamant and negative towards the idea. Some sequels that unexpectedly aired that missed out the expectations from viewers. And miscellaneous movies that left minimal feedback and lost interest. So, in other words, movies showing the best creative value but lack potential to showcase something different or better than their other works. So, for your convenience, I will be showing you a list of some movies that turn out to be successful by revenue, which is the highest box office income that they have received from the movies listed down there, and also the flops that turn out to be unsuccessful for one of the movies that are listed. So, here it is. So in this list, you could see their box office overview that is referenced from Wikipedia. And under success of the year by revenue, you could see that Neja 2 has the highest box office. And then the lowest yet for this year is Tron Ares that lost over $78 million in their investment. So, like I was saying before, 3 of Disney's movies have flopped the box office, losing about approximately $190 million. But they rekindled their failed investments with the releases of Zootopia 2 and Lilo and Stitch that made over $1 billion. And speaking of Disney, if I really want to talk about Netflix, then I will be doing so with their movie The Electric State, which is considered the most expensive movie streamed on Netflix, with their overall budget of $320 million, and many consider it the worst movie by critics and audiences, by their weird designs, underwhelming screenplay, and also production value, resulting mediocre ratings with that budget that is so expensive. Now that that's out of the way, let's move on to the positive side of the movies of 2025. And also presenting one of my worst as well of this year, or last year. So, what are the movies that I would consider best when it comes to the overall vibe, the engagement to viewers, their production value, and even acting, of course? So I will be showing you my list of the best movies of the year. So here it is.
So here is the list of movies that I consider the best in my view. Movies that has stunning visuals, stories that are engaging, and movies that improved in quality and its voice. If you're wondering, I do have a star rating and I rate them by quarters, kinda like Dave Meltzer. So that's how I would determine how good or bad the movie is without giving you any spoilers and just letting my rating convince you to think about that. I wouldn't guarantee that one of my ratings would contain spoilers, so I recommend that you would watch the movies first before you would listen to one of my ratings. Starting off with movies with a 4-star rating. From the very bottom, we have Neja 2 that received the most in their box office income. The movie had very stunning visuals and the action sequences are entertaining. My only takeaway of this is the story. It is a little difficult to understand since there are a lot of characters involved and plot twists that seems to be out of place. But overall, it's a great movie that displayed their culture and their visuals. Next is Lost in Starlight, a Korean animation film that also has very stunning visuals and also a very beautiful message about grief. But the movie's love story is what I'm expecting more, since their relationship leads to something more positive as opposed to being bittersweet and sad. That would have been a better trajectory of their love story since the message is about grief, where you would still care about the person despite having a conflict that would have been the climax of the movie. So that's my only review about this. Next, we have another Korean animation film, K-pop Demon Hunters, which is a favorite by many. It also has stunning visuals and the vibe to it feels fun and very K-pop-ish. But my only takeaway is the animation consistency, not something to complain about, but something that is observed. Since their animation is not smooth, when it comes to the scenes that are slow paced, the animation consistency was choppy and not so smooth. And when it comes to active scenes that have a lot of action going on, the consistency of it was smooth and adds more dynamics to it. Like I said, it's not something to complain about, but it's an observation in my case where animation needs to be a little smoother. But K-pop Demon Hunters is a great film with music and the style that fits the vibe and entertaining for everyone. Next on the list is 28 Years Later, the only British film that made it in my top 5. I'm not going to say that it has very stunning visuals, but their camera work, prop designs, and production value was a big improvement in this film. Comparing to the sequels, the camera work was not the best, where there is so much camera movement and close-ups during active scenes and plot lines that are broad. For example, 28 Weeks Later, that had the same camera work and the story had nothing new to add with the metaphor of the title. With 28 Years Later, the story had more emotional depth and the environment with the filter was more colorful and fitting as it adds to the metaphor 28 Years Later. Out of the 3 movies from the film series, 28 Years Later is what I consider the best. And spoiler alert, my only takeaway for this film is the character Jimmy, where his role at the ending kind of ruined the vibe. Next movie is Good Boy, which is an independent film that follows through the terrifying wonders of a dog. Overall feels to it was solid. It plays around with some psychology to it, so as you're watching, you would feel terrified with the horrors as the dog journeys. But there's nothing much that you can expect in this film like an elaborate backstory or some history behind it. So this film had no clear lore elaboration, but just the feels to it. Nothing much to say, but that's all you're gonna expect. Next movie is titled In Your Dreams. Overall, it looks promising with their concept of Mr. Sandman, the Dream Maker, and some fun family-friendly action with something imaginative. So it has this type of Disney aspect to it where it's magical, imaginative, and sometimes emotional. But the thing here is you wouldn't be expecting much of it since it is just a simple film that is less stylish. But it's still a good and entertaining film for all ages with great creativity in their plot and imagination to it. Next is the only Disney film in this list, Zootopia 2. For this one, there's nothing to expect here since it continues the adventure of 2 main characters and reptiles making an appearance that missed out on their overall setup of Zootopia. But story-wise, it's still comedic, so there will be moments that will make you laugh as well as plot twists that are convincing. So the sequel is great, but not as great as before. That's my only review. Now moving on to the movies with a 4.25 star rating, starting off with Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Despite being released in 2024, I am referring to this film as part of 2025 because of the international release date. Now to the main topic. When it comes to the characters that are featured in the film, it made more history surrounding the Sonic franchise. For the film, with the story and the thrill of it, there was more to it, with Jim Carrey's comedic act that makes it funnier and interesting, and more that adds to the emphasis of Sonic. Overall, it made more history surrounding its characters, and the vibe of the story feels more like Sonic. Next, The Fantastic Four First Steps is the only Marvel film that is in this list. Comparing to the three Marvel movies that are released, Thunderbolts, which many consider the best Marvel film of the year, but in my opinion, I was expecting more from it since their story from the film didn't show a lot of their niche as anti-heroes or much on a superhero and villain story and what they represent as a clique, and the villain roles having less impact towards it. But the Fantastic Four has a more staple setup of heroism and appeal. The elevation of the plot went accordingly through the confrontations with Galactica and Silver Surfer, and having more action and drama to further emphasize the likeness of most Marvel films. To conclude this, if you really want me to compare it with Brave New World, that Captain America movie seemed underwhelming. Next after that is Exit 8, which is a Japanese psychological horror film that is based from the game Exit 8. The cinematography of this was impressive, where the overall setup captures the game's essence and mechanics with a little bit of lore behind it to make it interesting, as well as camera shots taken in a long period of time without any mistakes. So you can get a good experience with the game, and it's made up melodrama. My only takeaway for this film is there are additional mechanics to the game, like more anomalies and the use of CGI. It does add depth to the main character, but with the additional anomalies, it made the movie overloaded with not so good CGI. But it is still a great movie. Next is Wicked for Good, the sequel to Wicked from 2024, where it continues the story of Elphaba and Glinda, leading to its finale. The movie was an adaptation to the musical play, and it did just that. But they added more emphasis and additional plots to further out their leads to the ending with a mixture of two novels by Gregory Maguire. And overall experience had great drama to it that feels very emotional. So the feels of it is very strong. But there are some takeaways that I want to mention. The playlist of songs in some scenes takes too long to finish, so you wouldn't catch a break from it. And some characters that have been featured in the previous film became less interesting and completely useless to the plot. Next is Avatar Fire and Ash, the last movie of 2025. For their third, the visuals are stunning, and the action to it was solid, as well as character development being involved in this scenario. But the representation of it didn't show a lot with Fire. By that, it looks underwhelming by their environment and its theme. The story had notable moments showing most of the defeat and changes that will better represent the future. And it's very long. So losing interest to the plot can happen once in a while. Now moving on to movies with a 4.5 rating. The first is F1. Starting off, the atmosphere was promising with the cars, the environment, and the music. With that, it also adds some suspense to it, so the drama between the role and the racing was effective. My only takeaway is the story. It wasn't showing a lot in detail and its conflict, and most of the film was just the vibe of F1. In other words, the film is more on the F1 vibe rather than the balance with the plot and racing. So the mesmerizing part are the races and the atmosphere that would feel like you were there. Next is Superman. the only superhero movie that has the highest rating. The positive note here is their improvement and new features. The plot improved with something that is more classic, with new heroes to make their debut and return. The conflict with Lex Luthor has expanded more, and the love story of Lois Lane, which in my view is not very strong. My only takeaway for this one is I feel like the heroes that are featured would have had their own film instead of including them to Superman, just so the plot would feel more classical with just Superman. But overall, it adds to the dynamic of making a team of superheroes that will have a bigger conflict. Who knows if Superman will make an appearance in the new Supergirl movie that will be released on June 2026. Next is the third Knives Out movie, Wake Up Dead Man. So it's just like another detective blank mystery, but with a better plot line and plot twist. With that, there is more suspense to it, and the mystery is more elaborate. So there are moments that are more shocking than the previous sequels. So this movie did explain a lot of things and a lot to see with Detective Blank's mystery. And that's about it. Now moving on to the two movies that I considered the best of 2025, which are two movies based on novels, Frankenstein and Nuremberg. First is Frankenstein with a 4.75 rating. This film received a lot of accuracy with the novel's plot points and their Victoria era theme, while giving a lot of emotional moments and suspense to it. With that, you're seeing much of its appeal. But my takeaway is their misconceptions with the captain's name and origin that may add some confusion to readers. In conclusion, this film explained the novel accurately while conveying a lot in their melodrama. And lastly, the only 5-star movie that is listed is Nuremberg. Considering the novel by Jack Healy, that is evidence-based and true, the film captured everything, including the roles that made it seem genuine, like Russell Crowe's German accent and moments that seemed worrying, as well as its historical theme to it, adding footage of the horrors that happened in World War II and Goring's interpretation of power and evil, and also having some heartfelt moments with his family. So this film was respectable and intriguing, with World War II being a big part of the world's historical events. So that is my list of movies that are the best based on my analysis and critiques, and also some reference from critics, bloggers, and movie creators that shared their opinion as well.
So that is the list of the best movies of 2025. So what about the worst? And here's the list right over here.
So here's the list of movies that I consider the worst in my view. Movies that didn't reach expectations, that lacked effort in making anything intriguing, and performances that seemed out of place or performed badly. In this list, I will be adding my honorable mentions since the list didn't have a lot, ranging from 2.5 and below are considered the worst. With movies that has a 2.75 rating, they are considered the worst, but not so much. But it can be relevant to other concerns and reviews from others. So here's the list. Starting off with a movie with a 2.75 rating is The Electric State from Netflix, which many considered it to be one of the worst movies in 2025. To support that claim, I find that their cinematography doesn't have any contrast to it, since everything that you see is so dampy, and some of the robot designs were unappealing. With their time set to the 90s, it feels too advanced. It would have been better if they go forward in time, or maybe some inspirations of futurism by artists, specifically painters, to give it more appeal to stick with that timeline. The story itself is okay, but there's little that is expected in this film. Next movie is Dora and the Search for Soldorado. By their line of action, it's promising for a Dora movie, but there are a lot that I observed in this film. First are the animals. Boots and Swiper doesn't feel anthropomorphic that defines their personalities, where you wouldn't hear Swiper saying his one-liners, and Boots is just a regular monkey. Second, there is less imagination to it, where everything, including the animals, are real and nothing much that reminds about Dora. But the positives are the thrills, and Diego's character was more convincing. So overall, this film was fun, but there was less personality that can be fitting to Dora's backstory. Next movie is The Map That Leads to You, that is based on a romantic novel by J.P. Moringer. Starting off, the film does explain the love story and the message behind it, but their love story didn't have a lot of conflict and convincing resolutions. It just seems too perfect and less dramatic. The message about experiencing life instead of the future was uninspiring, where conveying the message doesn't feel convincing in real life. So the story lacks much on the conflict, but the vibes of this movie, like the location, was something to appreciate. Next honorable mention is The Twits from Netflix. The only positives I can give are the characters in the book that made appearances and the story capturing its fairy tale ending. But the main problem of this movie is how they made too much ideas, adding new characters which too will be the protagonists instead of from the plot, and changing its ending that seemed out of place. Since the book itself was too simple and didn't have a good ending to it, the movie would have been good on their accuracy that may lead to a fair ending. But with all the change-ups, it means less. So those are the honorable mentions. Now we're moving on to the main lists with movies that have a 2.5 rating, and one of those movies is the third installment of I Know What You Did Last Summer. For the story, it just followed the same gimmick of the 1997 film, except that there are new and returning characters involved. Overall, there's nothing special about the new roles in the film, but the film really made a good enough ending. Another would be film adaptations from the novel, since there is one that focuses on the original plot and the rest were something that is just added. So originality from the book wasn't played around a lot and didn't settle anything with the multiple endings. Next film is Megan 2.0. What's noticeable is the switch up of genres, where they transition from horror to a more family friendly perspective. So it missed out on the representation of Megan, since a lot of people are familiar with her villainous role and something that is gory. The good part of the film is Megan's change of heart, so it can get interesting, but overall setup was nowhere near to the creepiness to it, and design and CGI was visible by its camera manipulation. Next is Fear Street Prom Queen. One positive thing I can give is their vibe. It feels like it with the old footage and the atmosphere of it. If we're referring to Film Street's cause and effect, it doesn't make any sense to this film, since the characters appear to be normal and not feral like the rest of the killers. The horror wasn't scary, so it's more on the thriller side of things. In conclusion, the plot was okay, but it lacks certain appeals of Fear Street. Next are the films with 2-star ratings. First one is Robin, a British independent film that is advertised as a Megan and the Boy adaptation. If they're going to make the next big thing to names like Megan, it is not exactly by that level. Robin lacks personality and something that can be interesting, and the kill counts that happened didn't apply to reason. The horror was too much, with loud sounds and flashing lights. Experience in this movie was a bore. The story had nothing different, and the way that is advertised didn't give anything that can be relative. Next is Snow White, which by many considers it one of the worst movies by Disney and the year 2025. To support that claim, I have a lot. First, the story was retold from being so simple to more difficult, where there are additional characters that don't do a lot with the plot. Second is the acting, where some of the parts don't resemble or look close to how it's told, so there is no passion to it. Third are the prop designs and CGI. The props look cheap and unappealing, and with the use of CGI to the dwarves doesn't blend in with the physical features in human perspective. But with the animals, it's okay. So that's my only positive. But their overall production and screenplay made it too difficult to reimagine Snow White. And fourth is Snow White herself. Her character is nowhere close to the Snow White we know, where her dreams of finding true love turn into being brave and true, which doesn't resonate with her personality. So my opinions were too negative, but the positives I can give are the songs that are remade like Hi Ho and Whistle While You Work. It gave a little bit of fun and throwback to it, but the rest are pretty mixed, where some fit in and some don't. To top it all that, it's unoriginal. The story doesn't display the classic tale of Snow White, and that's it. There are more that I find negative, but with those key points that I mentioned, that would sum it up on how the movie flopped the box office. Next are the movies that are below 2 stars. First up, it is Smurfs, where Rihanna as Smurfette is being promoted. With this movie, it was least expected, since Smurfs don't feel relevant as much, and the plot doesn't give any spark to it. By my observations, the way they combine their animations and camera scenes was confusing by where they are and what subjects are there. Where there are some instances that animated scenes are mixed in real life. For example, the fortress of Razamel looks real, but the inside is all animation, assuming that Smurf Village is animated and the rest will be in real life. Another are inconsistencies of the film, where one Smurf that has a male body with a female voice, and too many characters that are featured that don't apply to the plot, where Smurfs aren't the focus here but Rihanna. So the plot line doesn't seem simple and standard in their literature. Also, the plot has a decent character development, but it's not the convincing part of it. Next is Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare, which is part of the TCU series that stands for Twisted Childhood Universe, if you're familiar with it. Overall story adds to its uniqueness since it's meant to reimagine Peter Pan in a horrific way. But the story needs some more background, like more characters to add more setting to it. By the looks of things, it looks grotesque, where the roles don't look like something that is Peter Pan. So the plot is just giving Peter Pan instead of seeing it, which looks generic and unconvincing. The film has some positives to it about the main character being the villain and Captain Hook as the victim, but the bottom line here is it doesn't feel appreciative. So much of it was just for show and not relying on something memorable. Next is Bride Hard, and this movie is considered one of the worst in this list. So there are a lot of things that I find negative. First is the intro. So in the beginning of the movie, there's a specific scenario that seemed reasonable to be there, but it was never continued or never added to the main plot. Second is the action. By the duration, it starts off looking impressive, but then it gets worse. So it'll look unimpressive as it progresses. Third is the comedy. The comedy doesn't give anything funny but cringe. It feels very old school with their old jokes, so it doesn't fit in this era. And fourth, the plot and the setting was too simple. So all you're getting is just a subjective theme with no directive goal, and positives of this movie are very slim. And lastly is Bambi the Reckoning, which is another movie from the Twisted Childhood universe like Peter Pan. Together with Bride Hard, it received the lowest rating in this list. Starting off with the plot, there was little expectations. The elevation was quick-paced and boring. and the setting felt like a zombie apocalypse movie that can be misinterpreted with natural elements. But at least it has some depth to it, like the tragedy of Bambi and his mother, as well as the hunters and the rabbit, but there could have been more. Their production value and the character appeal was underwhelming. The deer model that is portrayed was okay, but their mannerisms and effects were unrealistic. For example, when the deer is going to run, it charges like a bull, which doesn't look normal. And some of the effects of the deer can sometimes blend in and sometimes don't. Another example would be a particular scene where the animation breaking the door looks noticeable. Overall, the film had the elements of Bambi, but it didn't have a lot of effort into making something that is genuine and more thematic. Just like Peter Pan, it doesn't feel appreciative with the same reason. But Peter Pan is more overwhelming than this movie. So those are the movies that I consider the worst of 2025. You may agree or disagree to some. Well, that is because I base it on how I view it, analyzing how convincing and relative it is, how they made a lot of effort into making it, and leaving the viewers satisfied. There are more movies that people considered them worse, but I didn't add them because I haven't seen them. With those movies that consider the worst or underwhelming, it doesn't mean that those shouldn't be watched. It means that there are better movies out there that people can watch and can relate to their likings.
So, now that you've seen the best and the worst movies that I have listed down, now let's go on to the overview of the movies of 2025, where I will make some objective information of how these movies turn out to be good and bad. So, here are my takeaways. So, first of all, Netflix has the best hits, where Netflix films received positive feedback with better results of movie engagement, quality, and popularity. Where you have films like Frankenstein, Wake Up Dead Man, In Your Dreams, K-pop Demon Hunters, and Lost in Starlight. And also movies that are popular by love, hate, and memes. So the movie that is popular by love is K-pop Demon Hunters, and by hate is Snow White, where the songs and the vibe received positive and negative feedback respectfully. And when it comes to social media and internet trends, there is the Minecraft movie and Wicked for Good. A Minecraft movie with Jack Black's role as Steve made fans go crazy with his one-liners and the songs. For example, if you remember the line from the film where Jack Black goes chicken jockey, there is like a lot of videos where people are going crazy. They're throwing popcorn. They brought chickens in the cinema, and there's even explosions. So it was pretty wild. But it's also treating a movie as a joke instead of feeling appreciated. Whereas Wicked for Good, with songs played from social media, that is fun. Like, for example, No Good Deed being used for fun gestures. And if we're gonna talk about movie improvement, there are some movies that I would consider an improvement in their production value and also storytelling. So starting off with Superman, Superman improved their plotline and personality from the rendition of 2013's Man of Steel, where the 2025 film displays a more classic setting of Superman and Lex Luthor, and also the love story involving Lois Lane, giving a representation that is more true to the background of Superman. And another would be 28 Years Later, that improved its production quality, where prop designs look genuine and new to its apocalyptic aspect, as well as their cinematography, where camera work was balanced so you could see better, and also some filters that would feel vibrant to the movie when it comes to warm and cool colors. And lastly would be Predator Badlands. Despite the flop, it gave a better representation of alien life when it comes to the environment, props, and also some emotions added to it. And lastly in the overview is unreleased movies. And I would give one example from live action movies, where you have three live action movies that are released in 2025, but there is actually one that is not released, and that is Makoto Shinkai's live adaptation of 5 centimeters per second. It was released way back in October 2025 in Japan, but it was never released by that year. And the movies that didn't get the release internationally, specifically my country, the Philippines, are Anaconda, Hamlet, the SpongeBob movie. So those movies are gonna be set to release by 2026. So that is the overview of movies that are the best, the worst, and also that flopped. And for your convenience, I have provided a document that is right below the description. So you may check that out if you really need some more information when it comes to this video not giving you enough. So that is it for this overview of the movies of 2025. Let's just hope 2026 can do better. So thank you for sticking around. Have a blessed day.